Hello there everyone and welcome to the channel. In today's video, I'm going to be telling you a story about why Jango Fett was chosen for the genetic clone template for the clone army. This story comes from the Jango Fett open season comic. It is one of my personal favorites. Now don't get me wrong, I've always really liked Jango Fett, but this issue really made me fall in love with him as a character. He was really cool in Attack of the Clones, but we didn't really get to see a ton of him. This comic explores a lot about his life and backstory. This series is a 4-part issue which came out in 2002. They call each issue seasons. Season 1 is issue 1, if that makes sense. Now, if you're new to the channel, first of all, welcome. I just want to let you know that most of my videos, including this one, are part of the Legends timeline, not Disney's canon. Now, with that out of the way, let's begin. Season 1, or Issue 1, starts out with Count Dooku talking to Palpatine. He tells Palpatine that their search for the clone template is over because he found the right candidate. Palpatine asks him to tell him what he has learned about Jango Fett and his past. So Dooku starts out by telling Palpatine about Jango's early years. His family was murdered by a man named Vizsla, who was a part of the Death Watch. They were looking for a Mandalorian named Jaster Muriel. Jango runs away as his family's getting shot. He ends up getting found by Jaster and several other Mandalorians. After escaping a dangerous fire, they eventually make it to a town. After a while, Jaster, Jango, and the other Mandalorians attack Vizsla and his men in the town. Jango helps by running under the tank they are using, placing a detonator under it, and blowing it up. As the fighting continues, Jango picks up a blaster and points it at the now unarmed Vizsla. "You killed my family," he says through tears. "Casualties of war," Vizsla responds. Vizsla releases a blade from his wrist and the two begin to fight. Just when it looks like Vizsla is about to win, Jango shoots him. Now, there are a lot of tragic and dark origins in Star Wars, like Anakin Skywalker and Asajj Ventress. Jango Fett's is a very unknown and underrated tragic backstory. Imagine going through that at around 9 years old. This is one of the reasons Palpatine and Dooku picked him. In Palpatine's own words, orphans are the most dangerous men. So Jango Fett is basically like if Batman were a killer. Anyway, back to the story. So after Jango shoots Vizsla, Jaster picks him up and asks him if shooting him makes Jango feel any better. Jango tells him that it doesn't, at least not yet. Jaster tells him that that's good, and welcomes him to the Mandalorians. So that ends Season 1. In Season 2, the issue starts out a little bit before Dooku is telling Palpatine about Jango in Season 1. Dooku is interrogating a Mandalorian named Silas. Silas tells Dooku that Mandalorians can normally withstand such interrogation processes, but he can't take this one anymore. Dooku tells him to tell him what he wants to know. Silas asks Dooku if he's really going to make him betray the greatest Mandalorian to ever live. We then cut back to about 20 years before this moment. Jango Fett is about 15 years old at this time, and he's just finally been given a squad to lead. The Mandalorians get together in a briefing to discuss the upcoming mission. They had to do a routine extraction mission. They were told that there would be light resistance. Now, one thing I want to note here is that Jango's armor is very similar to Boba Fett's design. Now, it's possible that this inspired Boba to paint his armor green and yellow. Now, their mission is anything but smooth and routine. Jango's ship gets shot down and crashes on the planet below. They get out of the ship and are immediately attacked by gorilla-like aliens on the ground. They are being shot down left and right. They all attempt to regroup around Jango. Many of them do, but some do not. While the Mandalorians are trying to regroup, Jaster and another Mandalorian, Monstros Muriel, get separated from the others. Jaster saves his life and they continue moving forward. They are then attacked by Death Watch. Vizsla, who is still alive, is leading these Death Watch Mandalorians. Jaster is then betrayed by Monstros, who says he's done taking orders from Jaster. Jango, who's finally caught up to him, watches as Jaster gets gunned down. Jango manages to get Jaster's body out and carries him back to where the other Mandalorians are. He becomes the leader of the group, which is pretty impressive considering he's only 15 years old. Season 3 starts out with Dooku telling Palpatine about Jango. This issue is interesting because we actually see why Dooku considered using Jango in the first place. This story takes place about 12 years before the events of Attack of the Clones. Jango Fett and his Mandalorians have been assigned to stop an insurrection on the planet Galderon. Once they defeat the insurrection, Jango flies into the governor's castle to collect the bounty. He walks in there and points a blaster at the governor's head, demanding he give up Vizsla. The same Vizsla who killed Jaster Muriel and Jango's parents. Jango tells him that he knows that he's been hiding him here while he starts to rebuild the Death Watch. Little does Jango know that Vizsla is hiding behind a curtain, pointing a blaster at Jango's head. The governor nervously looks at the curtain. Jango notices this and turns to look. Vizsla springs out of the curtains with his men and begins shooting at him. Jango ducks in the nick of time and is forced to retreat out of the window, telling the governor that he's crossed the wrong man. As he's flying away, his jetpack gets hit and he falls to the ground. The governor tells Vizsla that he's called the Jedi in to help with the situation, claiming that they are the victims of a brutal Mandalorian attack. After Jango's fall, he gets up and notices the Jedi ships. He rushes back to his camp to try to warn them, but it's too late. As soon as he arrives, so do the Jedi. The Jedi are being led by Jedi Master Dooku. He tells them that they are accused of murder and that if they stand down, they will be treated fairly. Jango orders his men to open fire. They do, and several of the blasts are deflected back onto them from the Jedi's lightsabers. Seeing this, Jango orders them to switch to projectiles. This sort of works, but not as well as Jango was hoping. He tells them to get airborne. One Mandalorian, whose name is Miles, jumps up and begins to fire down on the Jedi. One Jedi jumps up to where Miles is in the air and slices him in half. This angers Jango. Jango, who has lost his weapons at this point, picks up a rock and begins fighting the Jedi. With the rock, he's able to kill 5 of the Jedi. He engages the Jedi who sliced Miles in half and headbutts him with his helmet, probably breaking his jaw. He then finished him with his wire. So Jango, with his bare hands, was able to defeat 6 Jedi. It makes sense why Count Dooku picked him to become the template for the clone army. The clone's main purpose was to destroy the entire Jedi army. He then gets on his knees. "You killed them," he says. "We're all dead." Now I know this is just a comic, but you can imagine the sadness in his voice. The people who have been like his family after his real family died. The men who trusted him to lead them. The comic then cuts to Dooku, who's standing off to the side. "What have we done?" he asks, further solidifying his hatred for the Jedi Order. At the end of the issue, we cut back to Dooku talking to Palpatine about Jango. At this moment, we see Jango land his ship and look at the building that Dooku is in. Season 4 starts out right after this. We get a conversation between Dooku and Jango. They both place their weapons on the table. Jango tells Dooku that he's made him a large offer. However, after finding out that Dooku was there on Galderon, he pulls his blasters back to him. Dooku's confused because he didn't think that Jango had the Force. Jango explains that he uses magnetic gloves. He also tells Dooku that he released a plague into Dooku's system the moment Jango walked into the room. He uses this to help him bargain. Dooku's impressed and tells Jango that he will give him whatever he wants in exchange for the cure and some information. Dooku wants to know what happened after the massacre. Jango tells him the story. So after Jango's friends were killed, the Jedi handed him over to the governor, and the governor sold him into slavery. He was a slave on a spice transport ship for years until the vessel was attacked by pirates. The owners of the spice ship begged for his help. They promised that if he helped them, he would be a free man. Instead, he just escaped. After he heard that Jango had escaped, the governor who had placed him into slavery was terrified and went to protect Jango's armor that he had stolen, only to find out that Jango was already there. Jango threatens the governor and asks where Vizsla is. We then see Vizsla flying his spaceship when it's suddenly attacked by Jango's ship. Jango flies on board the ship and starts attacking Vizsla. Vizsla tries to run away, but Jango chases after him. They fight, and eventually Vizsla jumps into an escape pod. Jango jumps in, pushing him. They both land on the planet below. They have a vicious battle, and when it seems like Jango's going to lose, he cuts Vizsla with his arm blade. Smelling the blood, some nearby predators attack him, ending him once and for all. Now back in the present, Jango tells Dooku that his story is over and the virus should be hitting his brain soon. Dooku informs him that he used the living force to heal himself. Dooku asks him what Jango wants other than all that wealth. Jango asks for an unaltered clone to become his apprentice and carry on his legacy. Another motivation for Jango is that he will be an instrumental part in the destruction of the Jedi Order. So that is the story of why Count Dooku chose Jango to be the genetic clone template for the clone army. Like I said, it's one of my favorite Star Wars comics ever. It really made me appreciate Jango more as a character. What did you guys think? And what do you guys think about Jango after hearing the story? Let me know down in the comments below. So that's it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did enjoy it, why not consider subscribing?